Welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to Real Talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
Welcome back to another Owning Her Health. I'm excited today. Katrina Roddy is, I would say, she is the goddess, since we're always talking goddess wisdom here, goddess of really getting into the conversation of the corporate breakup. She's been doing some great work. She's a best-selling author. She just published a second contributing to a second book. And she really, I know a lot of times we're talking about, owning our health and the many facets of it. And honestly, your financial wellness and getting into doing things on your own and getting out of uncomfortable and also unhealthy situations, especially as women, we've really kind of got to take the bull by the horns there and take on opportunity like this in the pandemic, which I'm going to get to talk to her, how soon before the pandemic was she in this conversation, because it's perfect for this time period right now where everything in that we knew as business is just kind of up in the air. Everything we knew as education is up in the air, what you actually need in qualifications, timelines are even off. I mean, everybody's doing at 24/7 markets. We have the technology, we have the access. I personally feel like we're past the conversation of equality in terms of at least men and women. I really feel like we have enough if we take the opportunity to now fill in the equity gaps with these advantages. So I feel like the corporate breakup conversation and everything else that's going on with Katrina is a great conversation. So I asked her onto the show. So thank you so much, Katrina, for coming on. Why don't you give us a little synopsis in a couple of minutes of sort of how you got here to the work that you're doing, how you moved from your I'm always trying to take people from their kind of profession into their passion, purpose living.
I like that.
How did you take that sacred journey?
So let me just start off by saying thank you. And you're absolutely right. We are in times where there are shifts that are going on. There are changes, and people are stuck because they did not have the opportunity to mourn the 2020. They didn't have the opportunity to stop and refocus what they wanted to do. So my journey took me beyond, not beyond, but before 2020. So I was laid off after being in corporate for 30 years. And after being laid off, what I knew for sure is that I did not want to go back into corporate. I started at such a young age, and I had been telling myself and saying out loud, so be careful, manifestation does work.
That's right. You got to be careful what you talk about.
Be careful what you talk about. Yeah. And so I had always said that, by the time I turned a certain age, I was going to leave corporate anyway and start doing what I want to do. I just didn't know what that was. So, I said the first part of it, but never knew what the second part was. So they laid us off. There were 5 in our group. 4 of them said, yay, I'm going to retire. And then I said, I can't retire.
I'm way too
what
young.
am I going to do?
I have things to do.
Yeah.
So what year was this, Katrina?
This was 2016. 2016 going into 17. So yeah, those years. And then after that, I thought my first step of progression would be to transition into maybe become an independent contractor, where I still had some corporate over me, but, they allowed us to be interactive and and I learned so much in the financial industry. However, I did not have both feet in, and it kept feeling like I had some resistance. So it wasn't until I got to that point where I started networking, and I was networking a lot. I was going to networking events at least 3 times a week. And I would just go and I'd talk about different things, and I'd say, hey, someone would ask, how do I budget? When do we start budgeting? And I just blah, 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 blah. You do this, because these are things I learned in corporate. I've always, helped train people. So then I'd go to another event and someone would say, how do I learn how? I was having full-blown meetings. And one lady pulled me to the side and said, honey, you give out too much free information. This is your job. So at that point, I still wanted to be able to help people. So what I did was took all of these things that I learned that I was a little different coming out of corporate, becoming an entrepreneur. I had all of these skills. I had all of these talents that I had acquired over the years. And so what I wanted to do was put it in one place. And that's when the book was generated. And so I put it into the book, and then that manifested into people started asking me, how do I get through these things? And it pushed me to be a bestseller because I realized people are looking for this information. Once I did that, it started me to think about, I am actually helping people make that transition, make the transition of being stuck in a spot where someone's telling you what to do every day. Someone's giving you an order, telling you when to go to lunch, when to come back, what friends to have, what clients to have, when to spend time with your kids, when to spend time with your spouse. Someone's dictating that when you're working in corporate. And so I decided at that point, I am helping people with that transition from one place to another, from employee status to becoming an entrepreneur. And you have to have an entrepreneur's mindset to make that shift. So that's where I help. That's where the health and healing comes from, because it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is. Katrina, there's so much about that story that I love. Number one is, like, you recognized early on, like, I'm doing what I got to do, or you kind of had that wake up moment where you're like, but this is not me.
Yeah.
And you decided, I understand this is not me. I'm doing it. And then, like you said, sometimes you got to be careful what you say, because when you are powerful, and that's the way manifesting work. People don't realize, it's not just like you're saying things and you're working it, but like you truly are not seeing you're seeing yourself in something else. And therefore things sort of shift to give you what you want, but you knew that there was more, and then you saw a gap in the market. And I love that, because I'm always talking to people at My Body Brand Academy. It's not about reinventing the wheel per se, although if you want to, that's fine, but it's going to be a lot more work for you to start the conversation, invent the conversation. Believe me, I kind of did it back in the day when physio yogis were not anything in the world. It took a long time. But you sort of saw where that curve was and where things were going. And then you were just you. You just sort of, let me organize it. And the next thing I really love is a woman took you aside, a sister said, let me explain to you, you're not. So in her mind, right, we need more of these women around us that are like, you're not my competition. I can let you just fry. I could see what you're doing, and then go and take it myself and go make a business out of that. She saw your potential, and she went like a sister, and she spoke to you, and you were receptive, because so many times we're independent doing our thing, or maybe we're scared and we don't take that information. So I love that relationship you guys had. And that's where we've got to be, right? Like, not if she had been more conditioned maybe into that, corporate model, that linear grind, she might have said, well, here's my advantage. Ooh, this lady gave me a good idea. Let me go take it. But she went and stayed in her goddess wisdom and knew, you know what, this one's the one that's going to do it. If anything, now you can help her one day. Like, she saw the light in you.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
And that third little bit is that you kind of gave yourself the title and the role. You put the robe on, you wrote a book, you decided, I am seeing results. I'm seeing the outcomes. I don't need somebody else telling me I got a degree in this, or that I'm valid enough. I'm going to write this book. So I love those three things. Those are really kind of curvy hustle things. I'm always talking about curvy hustles. Those are the key things. You and it wasn't that you didn't need help. It wasn't that you weren't going to play the system. It's that you were just being smart with it. So tell me a little bit about, being in the thick of it and where you are right now.
Gotcha.
If you could be you, let's say 10 years before. So this was several years before you had your corporate breakup kind of come in your lap, because the universe will do that. What do you wish you would have told her now, living, or can tell her now, right? On these sort of, what can you whisper in her ear now?
I would
woman you are now.
I would whisper and say, put yourself in the receiving mode. Because a lot of times we create the resistance. Things are coming to us all the time. Everything that we put out in the universe is coming to us. These things are, but we put up roadblocks because we hear other people say, maybe that's not what you should be doing. Maybe you don't know enough about that. The biggest thing when people come to me and I coach with them, they have to get over the fear of calling themselves an expert. I'm like, you have an expertise in something. So oftentimes what I do when they say that is I'll open up the dictionary and I have them read the definition of expert. And they fit every one of those words in that definition. I said, who's stopping you from doing that? And it kind of gives them a confidence builder at that. I had to do that myself. I'm like, who's going to read my book? Who's going to do all of these things? So if I was at that 10 years ago to now, I would have just said, stop with all of the noise and put yourself in the receiving mode because you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so tell us a little bit about what you're working on now and how you work and your programs and things like that. If we're thinking, if somebody here is listening to this, and I tend to work with, we're kind of in the same place. I'm just sort of working with a specific corporate. People don't realize healthcare had turned into corporate around 2000 or so. It was basically became corporate America, or whatever. And the same exact things you were saying, when to have your lunch. I mean, I was pretty much like, maybe you'll go to the bathroom, like in between patients and things like that. Productivity scores, how many people, and you're working with sick people. So it's like, I have to explain myself why it took them so long to be on the toilet for the first time. Like it's just ridiculous, right? When we're looking at metrics. So when I'm working with these healthcare professionals, they have this clinical expertise, but becoming this kind of owner of this new conversation or new way to kind of talk about something that's not the norm or what everybody else's expectation, as you said. Tell me a little bit about that experience working with you to kind of move from that employee mentality.
Okay, so I like that you use the word MOVES because I use that as an acronym. And that acronym stands for, you need a mindset reset. You have to own your new title. You have to value the relationships that you have because they're super important for you. You have to evaluate your money situation. A lot of entrepreneurs get stuck right there. And then the last thing, which is the most important, it just happened to be the S at the end of moves, but the most important thing is to share your story. You have to become vulnerable. People want to see where I was and how I got to where I am. A lot of times I would have people say to me, oh, I want to do exactly what you're doing. And I'm like, look, you're looking at chapter 12. You did not read 1 through 11. You're looking at the cliff notes. It took me a minute to get to where I am, and I'm very grateful for it. I'm very thankful for it because I continue to see myself moving through that. But when we talk about a mindset reset, I want people to focus on themselves, focus on things that make them feel good, focus on what makes you happy, the ease of doing business with yourself. So if that means meditation, for me, it does. If that means meditation, if that means exercise, whatever it is, if you need to punch out that anger that you get from being, let go or breaking up in a relationship, do all of those things. And then, when people leave from corporate, you were told what your title was, and you were told how to announce yourself. When you go entrepreneur, you don't know that. So you have to take ownership in a new title. How about be the CEO of your life? That's big enough.
That's exactly
title.
One of my taglines. Exactly. Just decide to be the CEO, and then it's executive. You have to execute. If you're going to take that title, that's the trick.
And then for V, it's value the relationships. Build your own personal board of directors. You're going to need people to push you along. These are mentors. They're probably in your space already. You haven't acknowledged what they do and how they work with you, but start thinking about how these people affect your life. It should be just like the board of directors. You should have the same amount of people. And the E is evaluate your money. We all have a money situation. We all have a money story. We all have some legacy that came. So for me, I came up in humble beginnings. My parents came up in humble beginnings. Guess what? Their parents came up in humble beginnings.
That was the story.
That's my story. So you have to understand your story and be able to adjust it to your new role as an entrepreneur, because it's going to change. And then share your story. When you're working in corporate, you are kind of closed. You don't say much because you don't want whatever you say or do in your lifestyle at times to affect your job or affect you from getting promoted. So a lot of people are closed. They're like, I don't feel my company should have that. And there are laws around not sharing your story. Like if you're in HR, you absolutely know that when a person comes in the interview, you can't ask them where they live. You can't ask them about their family. You can't ask those things. So you're not vulnerable. And then you just grow up in a culture where you just hold everything in. So share your story. As an entrepreneur, people don't want to see the end story. They want to know how you got there. They want to know the journey that you took, the route that you took, because maybe it affects them in the way that they see things. And one thing I want to mention is that corporate is a metaphor for life. I have people out there who say, well, Katrina, I wasn't in corporate, so I don't understand. That doesn't matter. Like I still have maybe there's some women who gave up their jobs early on because they had to take care of their families. But take the skills that you have, meaning if you had to be, and this was me, I was a swim mom, my son was a swimmer. Katrina, could you be responsible for the travel part of this? Katrina, can you run concessions? Katrina, whatever that job was, they asked you to do that because they saw a skill in you. Now take that and know that you have that skill and apply it to something that's more fulfilling to you. Something that makes you get up in the morning and say, this is what I do because I do it well. And that's your story. So come up with your story and be very vulnerable.
Right. And you mentioned, the several steps. So people say, well, why do I need a coach? Or, then there's different things, right? There's mentorship, there's coaching, there's consulting, and there's teaching. And I think, a good mentor can kind of slip into these different roles to some extent, but there's a point where there's like the hands off, right? Like you're not going to say exactly what to do, because in order to hand over that executive function, that person has to be at a level to execute, to discern and make their own decisions based upon the information, and maybe ask the right questions. And, I think we get into places where we get into such that habit of the employee mindset that we want to get fed, well, I'm in this safe zone. So I need to know all the information. I need to know all the options, all the outcomes. You're not going to know that, especially in entrepreneurship. So I do think the jump, again, not everybody can probably own a business. Some people maybe should own a franchise or get into something like a multi-level marketing thing, or take somebody else's business over and model it, because they're not wanting to do that piece where it's like, at some point, you're going to have to just
put both feet in,
go up on there and jump. And I've shown you my jump and we've talked about it. But how you're going to do it is you got to decide.
Yeah. And I told you that earlier in my conversation. I transitioned into a company where, yes, I was an independent contractor, but I still worked for them. So at one point I just said this, I can't be as creative as I want. It was a struggle for me. It was a struggle because I knew that was not me. And so you're right. You got to jump up there and say, jump. How are you going to do it?
Right. Let me see. And it might not be ideal. And you might say, ooh, next time I'm going to do it different. Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit before we move on into a next section, that, because I know that financial piece, that's really kind of the employee thing, right? Somebody setting your salary and deciding your value, and then you've got to flip it. And there's two pieces there. You have to say, what's my, if you're going off on your own, you're going to be a one-woman show for a little while. I am the company. So like, there's what I want to charge and bring in as the company. And then what do I want to set as my salary? So there's the value of your services, and then the value of you performing those services. Tell if, are there a couple of tips you could leave us with making that mind shift? Because I feel like that's really analysis paralysis for a lot of people.
Oh gosh.
Or the point where they run back and just say, let me just be an employee. I'll just go to a different place, or I'll go get a different degree and be a different employee.
Yeah. You have to get to a point where you're satisfied with yourself. You're satisfied. Once you're satisfied and you have a lot of things in your world that you can appreciate and be satisfied for, all of a sudden, I probably make, at this point in my career, maybe a third of what I made ending in corporate, and nothing's changed. Like I still feel the happy, like I feel I'm good, I'm satisfied. But it took a minute for me to even get to that point where I was satisfied because I did not know my value. They told me my value before. So remember, this lady said, Katrina, you're giving out free information. I didn't know I was supposed to charge for this or how that worked or how can I charge for that when these people need my help. And then you start to build your business around it and you understand that this is what you do now. So people value that and this is what they will afford to pay you for that. So it comes with being satisfied with who you are, where you are in your space before you can start to make those mindset changes about value and who am I, and it goes back to expertise. Who am I to be doing this or charging this? Or I had a coach and she knew her value because I paid for her value. I had a coach, I had these things, and then that's what gave me the confidence by getting another coach and saw how confident she was and how she got her value. And then that led to things that I didn't even imagine would happen for me. I ended up coaching with book author Marianne Williamson for 9 months, just because I was in a space where I was receiving. And so that was delightful for me. So there was so much that started opening up once I became satisfied with where I was in my space and how I was, and valuing that relationship with myself.
I love that. That's such a great wisdom nugget. And I can appreciate that because, and it doesn't matter, I think sometimes we think, oh, well, that's for, those are women that are like subdued or weaker
No.
or more feminine or what. No, I'm pretty darn independent. And I got myself stuck for many years around people who just, I'm realizing now, just didn't believe in me. Like I mean, it wasn't that they were making fun of me or not, but it was almost like they were entertaining me and being like, because of their own belief systems and in
Yes.
how it works,
Yeah.
and me being sort of different in my view, they didn't give me support. They didn't, come on to my ideas. They
Yeah.
decided theirs were more important or just sort of like looked at me like, oh, that's a cute thing she's doing, or not realizing I'm working it to be like, this is my priority now is with my family. And then in this year's when they're this old, this is when I've been setting strategically things up.
Yeah.
And I realized nobody was really appreciating that but
With
me.
you. Yeah.
And you see it when things happen. I had a relationship breakup. I had some financial infidelity that really almost bankrupted me. I had,
Yeah.
lost a lot of friends just because I realized they were not on my team. And when you do those changes, you really start to see there's like what you were hanging out in. And because you're so good and independent, you can make, I always tell everybody, I'm great at making, flowers out of poop.
Yeah.
You get so good at that and you don't realize it until you're like, wait a minute, you know, and so it really is, I think some of the most vulnerable people are the well-accomplished, ambitious women that went into corporate that around like, in their power years now, around 40,
Yeah.
in those years, you don't realize sometimes you've been so good at making the best out of less
Everything.
that
Yeah.
you literally limited yourself. Do you see that?
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely 100% right. I think that was what was the most shocking point of when I left out of corporate and I started doing my own thing. Remember, I had been in it for 30 years, even through my college days, all of this. So I didn't necessarily have a lot of college friends, but I had work friends because I started
Right.
so early. And these were friends of mine. When I left out of that space where we all were, I don't think they adjusted well. So
Right.
they would call me and say, Katrina, this person is looking for someone to head this department. I think you'd be great for it. And I'm like,
Not what I'm doing.
that's not what I'm doing anymore. Like they didn't believe it. They're like, how are you going from this to that? Like they never said that, but that's the undertone I got every time I spoke of something. It's totally different now. Now I have these same individuals who want to come to me and talk to me about their escape plan. How are they getting out and what do they do to make the shifts? And these were my friends, but once they saw that I became super satisfied, that's why I said you have to
Mhm.
become satisfied with who you are because that's all that matters.
Yeah, they
And
like
once they
you.
saw that I was satisfied, then all of a sudden they're like, this is real. Like, I can't believe the things that she's doing.
Right.
And it just manifests into different things. And the whole teaching, I think you saw my post where I said, I put myself out there and I just got into a community college where they're like, we want to implement your program. And
Love
I
it.
was
Because
ecstatic.
women multiply. We
Yeah.
don't add to things. I heard Pastor Sarah Jake Roberts say that once, like, women don't add, we multiply.
Yeah.
And that's so true. It's not like we're like adding a little spice or adding a little something to just make what is better. We literally 10 times it, morph it,
Yeah. I love that.
create
I
kind
love
of
what you
thing.
just said. Yeah.
Love it.
I love that.
So kind of tell me, let me flip the question I gave you in the, we were talking about if you could tell that woman 10 years ago, the Katrina 10 years ago, what would you hope with
Yeah.
what you're seeing with everything 10 years down the line? So we are at, 2031.
Yeah.
And we've had whatever happened, and there'll be some sort of leveling off of whatever chaos is going on here. What would you hope you to hear
Yeah.
from that Katrina?
So what I would hope to hear is, you did the damn thing. I would hope to hear that you stayed consistent, you stayed open to ideas, you helped as many people as you could. I'm starting to see some of that now with people being laid off and this great resignation that's going on,
Right.
and people are looking for different things. My hopes is that I eventually have a school and I am teaching other entrepreneur coaches. What I hate to see are failing businesses because they didn't know. They didn't know the steps. They were so into their passion that they didn't realize that there are steps to take as an entrepreneur. So I'm hoping, that's part of me, and I'm manifesting by just putting it out there. But that's what my hopes are, to see that. So when I get to that point, 5, 10 years, could be sooner down the road, I can clearly stand back and say, that was in your path. It was in your path, and that's what you did.
Right. And
So
you declared it.
congratulations.
You declared it, which I love, which again
Yeah.
is super important. I think sometimes we don't declare things, and then if we do, maybe we say it privately in our mirror one day,
Yeah.
our little positive affirmations, but like putting it out there, like you said, like nobody can help us. That's again another thing that I think women are challenged with. Unfortunately, we don't have the networks. One of the reasons why I'm developing a community is because we really don't have the networks. Maybe once we make enough money, or somebody
Yeah.
sees us in enough power, or like you said, like we're doing it a couple years down the road. But at that critical startup and development point where we're not important enough, or people don't understand our point of view,
No.
especially since we're kind of, like I said, a curvier sort of different style. I love that, Sarah Blakely with Spanx just kind of like,
Oh, yeah.
did things a different way, because,
Uh-huh.
and people were actually being like, we need to look at this other type of leadership style that's a little bit more made out of the roles of community making and family values and
Yeah.
that sort of mindset. We don't have the networks because of that. Like, we don't have powerful networks we need at critical times, even in our own family. Like I said, I was in a very, great family setup, but in the reality was, I'm realizing now my ex didn't really think I was going to get anywhere because I wasn't in his corporate model.
Yeah.
And I realized like other business people he related to were never going to like, as much as they thought I could help them with their pain or something, they never could make the connection where this could be, supported financially. Like, it just wasn't, it was
Yeah.
so foreign to them. So some of it was us kind of leading the way to allow the time to happen
Yeah.
and us to now be mentors. But, you know, like I said, we don't have those networks. So where do you see them developing, or where do you see the gaps that we need to get those
Yeah.
power years powerful?
I just think that we need to continue to be consistent, like showing up, because as I mentioned before, just don't stop. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, it does matter. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter to me and the goals that I have. What I have to do is make sure that I'm authentic, that I'm satisfied, and that I am open for receiving. And once people start to see that, just think about, I am not only a woman in corporate, but I'm a Black woman in corporate.
Yep.
So I had to live through that. I had to live through people not seeing me, so to speak. I had to live through that. And the only thing that kept me going was I knew who I was. I knew, and then it turns around. Then all of a sudden you're like, I spoke to you 10 years ago and you didn't speak back. And now all of a sudden you want me at your conferences. I'm the
Some
same
people got to
person.
catch up. I mean,
Some
that
people
was
have to
part of
catch
our
up.
journey. I believe, the medicine women are your medicine, but the problem is we were looked at as poison.
Yeah.
At first, and to some people, we still are the poison. The people who are still gripping on, I hope this goes back to the way that was, or when is it going to get back to normal? It's like, that whole conversation. It's like, guys, it's now the end of 2021. Let's stop.
They did not get a chance to mourn. They're having a difficult
you're so
time.
right with that, because the grief process, right? We did see the anger, I think we saw it on a social level, but we keep kind of like, right, quieting it down, give everybody some money, give them the distractions, give them the alcohol, tell them to bake bread. I mean,
it bubbles up again.
Right. And it's just going to come out, and it's like, we're not going to solutions. And I think that's another thing that I think women undervalue ourselves for. We are solution makers. We go into something and we're just like, I always say, we open up the refrigerator, we see 3 things. We're like, how am I going to make a gourmet meal out of this? Men open up the refrigerator and they're like, we got to eat out. Now I need money. What am I going to sell to get the money? Or what am I going to do to get the money? Who am I going to call? And it's like, no.
Nope.
Learn how to work with what you got. Now, that doesn't mean you got to, unfortunately, sometimes we get into that kind of wounded feminine where we're like I was saying, like, make the most out of the least and never ask for more. I mean, sometimes you got to go to a neighbor and be like, look, I got this, this, and this. Do you have any milk?
Exactly.
Because I need the milk to make it really luxury.
And that's where the network comes from.
Exactly.
When you start to reach out. And I think it also comes from when you start to reach out and help those who, not even desperately, but you can see that they have the need. Had this woman not said that to me, my mindset wouldn't have even gone there.
Exactly.
So she reached out.
The medicine for you. And
she was my medicine. And then I feel like for me working with these college kids now, they're going to be the medicine on a different generation. You have Gen X, and if you want to know how not to work a 9 to 5, to work a 9 to 5, talk to a Gen Z. They got that down pat.
Mm-hmm.
So
and they're really taking advantage of the gig economy.
Yes. Yeah, so, absolutely.
And I think, unfortunately, some of them have us, the wounded Gen Xer parents.
Yep.
That might be influencing them. And unfortunately, some of them are the ones with the power and the money right now and pulling them into a world that it's just a selfish thing, because you got to look around and it's not that world anymore. Like, I'm even telling my kids, I've got an 18-year-old, and I don't know how much he's going to listen to me because he's 18 and he's a guy, and I'm his mom. And then my 22-year-old is kind of like, I'm like, sweetheart, now going on to graduate school, like, do you have to? Can you take that undergraduate? And maybe let's make a coaching program. She's in psychology. Maybe make some coaching program, do some waitressing, pay off. Like, it's a different world, but it's scary because they have to see, I feel very grateful that I'm holding on to entrepreneurship as an option, and that she's seen me do that. It's so important, like you said, like, who's around you and what you see, and this is most importantly, what they see you willing to give up to be, like you said, satisfied. And that's the thing that I don't think necessarily is all of us Generation Xers. It definitely wasn't our parents. Our parents would kill themselves doing the obligatory, and till death do us part, meaning I will kill myself just to get out of this, and so we have a mixed bag.
Evolution. It's an evolution of careers, I should say. Mm-hmm. So when I was growing up, I came from a family of 6. I'm number 5. So just imagine, I'm the only one that went to college. I'm the only one that started a career. So my parents were blue collar workers. Mm-hmm. I told them that I was going to work in corporate. You would have thought they would chop my head off. They said, what is that? Why would you do that? You need to be physically doing something, or it's not worth it. And you got to get health benefits, because they were all about benefits then. You get these and you get a good job. I said, no, this is what I want to do. Started in corporate. So here we are, years later. And now I have a 19-year-old who says, I'm not doing that. And I'm like, you have to get a good job. Use your brain. And he's like, no, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. So to your point, I'm actually listening to him,
Right.
watching how he's doing things, learning from him. When I got out of corporate, he said to me, I told him I finished a book. I was, being creative. And he says, Ma, I love that you're thinking above the collar. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he says, blue collar, white collar. Now you're being creative and you're using your mind. And I thought that was like, I use that all the time because when he said it, it clicked for me. And I'm like, yeah, I am thinking above the collar now. More people need to think above the collar.
Right.
But that's what I'm watching. So I'm watching him as he grows into an entrepreneur, as he wants to develop, music and his photography. And he wants to be this person who has that. And now he can learn from someone who's doing it. Like I have the stability to show him. And that's what makes me proud.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the way you're using your mothering in that way, because that's the way we can mix it, right? It's not one or the other, but it's also not what we were fed. Like it's gotta, like there's no alternative to mix it. There is if you are creative, and there is if you're willing to, be humble to some extent. And that doesn't mean you're a martyr. No. It means like you're just smart and strategic. And like you said, show up, keep showing up, have that courage. And I really do. I mean, speaking from a brown girl to a darker brown girl, what I'm saying is I feel like this is the time, like, where we could really take advantage of the technology, the education,
absolutely.
the fact we're old enough, like we're in a very, like, I feel like now I understand what the hell I went through and why I'm here and all that, because like it had to be. And that's why I had you on the show, because I'm like, this woman's a medicine woman. She's one of us. She was planted at the right time to go through the right stuff, to be the right mix of alchemy right now. So I love it. Katrina, what is, maybe we're going to close up shop here. What is one thing you'd like to kind of leave the audience with?
Well, I've talked about, being satisfied with who you are. I've talked about being open to receiving. You have to get yourself in that mindset. But one thing I always say, and I will tell people to the end, no matter what career you're in, no matter entrepreneurship or employment, if you're persistent, you'll get it. If you're consistent, you'll keep it.
Love it.
And that's what I live by. I try to be as consistent as possible.
That is such good stuff. Where can we find you if we've just fallen in love and need to talk to you? And maybe I know that we need to join forces now. I'll talk to you after the podcast. Where can we find you best?
I am on all social media platforms as KRoddy65. So KRODDY 65. And my website and my company is called The Corporate Breakup. And so you can find my website at thecorporatebreakup.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Katrina, for being here. This is a great example of potential. And I'm so happy to have you blessing my audience. And guys, if you really do reach out, either, if you're in, we're talking the same talk here. It's the time is now, or you don't have to do what we did, but like, you need to be okay with the choices you're making.
Be satisfied.
Satisfied. Exactly. All right, guys. Thank you so much for another great episode of Owning Her Health. We'll see you the next time. Take care.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.